Hey, it's Eric here. Welcome to another episode of our Black Gay Diaspora podcast. Very much looking forward to this particular episode. It was a few days ago that I realized that it has been 2 years since the idea first formed for this platform. So I decided to come on and share a little bit about what happened around that time, what preceded it, and of course, where it's gone to today with more than 50 guest interviews. Yeah, what a difference a few days makes, huh? I really had no concept of where this could go to or where it could lead. It all started one night in February 2021 in the dead of winter in Stockholm, Sweden, that I couldn't sleep one night. One of the things I've learned the last 3+ years as a digital nomad, mostly in Europe, is the importance of writing an idea down when it comes to mind. One of the ways that I do that mainly actually is through picking up my phone or my iPad and going onto the Notes app. And so this one night I did that. I couldn't sleep. I don't remember what was rolling around in my head at the time. I picked up my iPad and in the darkness just flicked it on and started writing down these ideas that really were coming to my mind organically. I do feel that this was not something I really was thinking about in the beginning of my journey of being a digital nomad in Europe. Yeah, it was something that I needed to write down, or I felt that I needed to write down. I had already started podcasting. I had been podcasting at that time for about a year with a friend of mine, Jenny. She came up with an idea a year ago, actually almost to the month. I can't remember the date, but almost to the month of us doing a podcast about being introverts and how, as introverts, we still are very active and social people. And that podcast that we did for a little over 2 years is called Wallflowers and Bloom Podcast. You can find that still on your major streaming platforms. I had an idea of what it was like to be a podcast host, to produce, to edit, and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. But I honestly never thought of myself as being a solo entity and doing a podcast or, a talk platform where I would interview people. But what kind of preceded that night, I had at that point been outside of the US, mainly in Sweden, for a little over a year. A little backstory quickly with how I was in Sweden. I first visited Sweden in 2015, August, through a coworker, a work colleague who suggested that I come visit there when I was making a visit to Denmark at the time to support a friend for the Ironman marathon in Copenhagen. And this work colleague, she was from Sweden or is from Sweden, and she's also Black. And when I shared with her that I was going to go to Denmark, she suggested that I also visit Stockholm, Sweden. And so I did, because I was like, why not? I love to travel, and it's one more country to tick off my list. If I could, I would definitely visit every country on the planet. But anyway, after visiting Stockholm over the years, or Sweden over the years, I'd really grown to like it a lot. And yeah, left my job of more than 20 years in September of 2019. And a month later, packed up and decided to give myself a couple years to see what could happen. This was not part of the plan. I was really okay with getting a 9-to-5 job in Sweden in particular. But anyway, that's just some of the backstory of why I was in Sweden. So back to that night in Stockholm, that night that I couldn't sleep, I just started writing down all these ideas. And yeah, what kind of happened around that time was, I have friends in Sweden. I have friends in Stockholm. I have a couple friends who are Black in Sweden, really good friends. But I was not meeting at that point Black gay people in Stockholm, Black LGBTQ plus people. This was just all part of me, out of general curiosity. But writing down these ideas for a podcast, who knows, I can give it to someone else and they can use it to maybe start a podcast. And so I was writing down possible theme ideas, possible titles. I actually started working on a logo that night because, my background is that I'm a graphic designer. Then I shared with a friend of mine in Stockholm, and, thank you to Patrick. I always give him a shout out because I think he was one of the first people, or the first person that really spoke to me in a way that I was able to hear when I shared the idea. And he said, I think it's a really good idea and I think you should just do it. And so that was February, late February of 2021. And then I spent the next full month just forming the ideas, forming the thing, creating a logo, coming up with a preliminary guest list, and with the goal of having my first recording in the end of March of 2021. Kind of a backstory around that time too is that I had been in Stockholm at that time mostly, but I'm not a resident of Stockholm, so I was only able to stay a certain amount of time. I was needing to leave, and so I came to England. I came to Liverpool actually through an American friend who had recently moved there. I was like, well, I'll just come to Liverpool, and as similar as I was doing in Stockholm, I'll rent a little place. Just kept, mulling around this idea and kind of fine tuning it. And then I got to my preliminary guest list. As a Black gay man, I'm always looking for representation in media. I had an idea of some, people in entertainment, people in politics, or wherever that I had always admired, who I discovered, writers in particular too, because I also dabble in writing. The people that I really were enamored by, who really had a large platform or who were known publicly, I would put them on the bottom of the list, and I would reach out to them once I got settled into, doing this thing that was still very scary for me because, as I mentioned earlier, I was doing it by myself. I don't think at that time I was necessarily focused on the Black LGBTQ plus community in the US, mainly because I was in Europe at the time. Every couple of days I would change this list or do the rankings over again. I hadn't really paid attention to the list in a while, but this particular day in late March, I had decided I need to reach out to someone now. I need to take action. And so I looked at the list and I saw that this guy was towards the top of the list. And that kind of surprised me because I was like, he's somebody that I had put in that category of people that I couldn't reach out to initially because of their platform. I'm not a religious person, but I am somebody who thankfully discovered how to be spiritual in my late 20s, around the time that I came out as gay. I always say that's that God voice or that positive intuition that talks to me in a certain way that for me is always calm and nurturing. And that voice said, well, reach out to him. If he responds, fine. And if he doesn't, that's okay too. I'll never forget that because that really got the ball rolling. It started the journey of this being an active and real and legitimate adventure for me. I sent him an email, and I remember because the place I was renting, there was a little picture window where the sunlight would always shine through in these curtains. And I typed that email, and that was probably, I think it was around 3 p.m. on that day. And I literally forgot about it. And then about an hour later, I would say it was around 5 o'clock, I got this ding on my phone that I had an email. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll check my email. And it was him. It was Leon Lopez, who I discovered his career as an actor. I discovered him probably around 2009, 2010 when he was really active on YouTube. And he's a British actor, or he was a British actor at the time that I discovered him. And over the years, I would casually follow him. And at the time that I had reached out to him, he was a director. He had directed one independent film that I know of called Soft Lad. Check that out. I would recommend. And then also he was directing soap operas in the UK. And he responded in saying that, yes, I would definitely love to come onto your platform. And that was good for me because one of the things I'm learning in this journey these last 3.5 years of being a digital nomad, and what that includes is also really fine-tuning where I would like my professional life to go. Because I had, as I mentioned before, I had lived a life that was a good life in LA. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, but I moved to LA to pursue acting, and that kind of fell to the wayside a couple of years after being there. Not because it wasn't possible, but mainly because of my self-esteem at the time. And so, yeah, I just bring that back to the present, or back to, when Leon Lopez responded in the affirmative that he would come onto the platform. That was an opportunity for me to stand up to my insecurities and to my fears, because my first thought was, why would he say yes to me? Who am I? Again, back to that voice. It just said, well, He said yes. Now you just take the next indicated step, and just got the ball rolling. And that very first recording, that was amazing. It was amazing because I walked through my fears. It was amazing because I got to see that I could hold my own with speaking to someone one on one. Yeah, it was amazing. But yeah, that's how I got going. This process of being the host and the producer of this platform, it means that I've recorded in everywhere that I've been. I transitioned from there and I started recording in Southern England. And that came about because a friend of mine in LA who is from the UK asked me if I would come down there to spent some time with his mom, who is elderly in her 90s, and she and I got along really, really well. And spending time with her really helped me to see that no matter what age I'm at, I have a choice every morning that I wake up to start the day with the hope and positivity and the belief that it will be a good day. And I definitely learned that from her, and I thank her so much. I thank you, Daphne, for that. But yeah, with the podcast, I kept recording and kept reaching out to people. And because I'm in the UK, I was in the UK at that time. I'm actually in the UK. I didn't mention that when I started this recording. I've been back in the UK since late September of 2022. After spending a little bit more time back in Stockholm, I came back here, and been here in Brighton, which is a coastal town in southern England. And if you ever are in the UK, I would definitely recommend coming to visit Brighton. I really, really like it here. It's really added to my experience and my belief in the possible and what can be achievable if I just believe in it. One of my mottos is have faith and believe. And so being here in Brighton has definitely reinforced that. Because of being in England, I was like, I need to reach out to people who are in the UK and to find out who they are. And from what I believe, I'm pretty sure, I'll have to do some fact checking after this, and I'm pretty sure that as far as European countries, the UK, the United Kingdom, has the largest Black population in Europe. And so there are definitely a lot of people here in the UK who are leading the charge and doing the work within the Black LGBTQ plus community activism as allies who are here. And so it was very easy for me to find people to reach out to here. And I did, and I reached out to people like Sean Wallace, and he's somebody that I have been able to off and on stay in contact with. And then there's Yassine Senghor, there's Bandy Kiki, who is originally from Cameroon, but who has a presence here in the UK as somebody who really uses her platform for change, for positive change. Yassine also, and a few others. And so, yeah, I just kept the ball rolling because I always say that this is community, this is building community. And me reaching out to individuals in the UK really reinforced that for me, being American, that, this can grow into something bigger than I expected it to be. And I'm really grateful to all the individuals who agreed to come on to this platform and share their stories, their personal lives, their professional lives, their journeys as Black LGBTQ plus citizens within their countries. Yeah, it's been really great for me to expand my knowledge and to myself to continue to grow, because the focus is on the person who is coming on to be interviewed. This is part of my journey too. This is an opportunity for me to continue to evolve, to grow, and to expand my awareness of the world outside of my own particular experiences as an American. Another person who has been great, and the reason actually why I'm here in Brighton, is a guy named Pierre Monnerville, who's a French photographer who's been here in the UK, I think about 17, 18 years. He's here in Brighton, and he was my episode 5 guest. He was the first person who asked me some questions, or he asked if he could ask me some questions towards the end of that interview. It's a lot easier for me to, in some ways, be behind the scenes and definitely to ask the questions. And I really appreciated that because it gave me an opportunity to see that there's a sense of courage in being vulnerable and being open in a recording on camera. The reason why I'm in Brighton is that Pierre suggested that I come here. He said, whenever you're back in the UK, I definitely recommend coming to Brighton. And then he interviewed me several months later because I was back in the US last year for the first 7 months, no, first 6 months of 2022. I realized, or had been suggested to me, that I started to put myself out there a little bit more on camera and to share, or not at that time on camera and recordings for sure, and start to share a little bit more about who I am because, I need to look at that I'm part of the brand too. So I thought of Pierre as somebody who could come on and maybe interview me, and he agreed to it. And it was a really great interview. 20 or 21, I'll put it in the description. I can't remember which one it is. Yeah, Brighton is amazing. It really is. It's in my top five of cities that I could really see myself living in. It really is. I definitely, as I mentioned, say come in to visit. It's considered the San Francisco of the UK. As a Black person, that's one of the things of, being on this journey of interviewing people and finding out their experiences here in Europe and different countries as Black people. And then me, myself, being in these different parts of Europe and these different cities in the UK and in Sweden, is seeing, how do I feel as a Black person here? And I'll say Brighton is one of the cities that for the most part, I'm aware, or I feel comfortable here. I'm definitely somebody that wants to see people that look like me wherever I go, especially in spaces where I feel some people, even today, as we know, because of racism, they can make you feel unwelcome or encourage you to think that you're not welcome in those spaces. I've interviewed people from Sweden, from Cameroon, here in the UK. I interviewed an American guy, Reggie, who's an American singer, actor who has lived in Germany for a long time. And speaking to an American who's lived in Europe for a long time, it was really great to get his perspective on things of being Black, but also American. In the States, there's so much focus in general in Europe too, because, racism is everywhere. I'll just say that. As an American, as a Black American, leaving my home country and coming to countries where, in some ways, for the first time, I feel American. And that's a new thing to become aware of. It's kind of a fascinating thing because it helps me to see how much culture and the positive and negative aspects of culture of society do affect how I see myself. Coming to Europe and for the first time hearing myself described as the American, not the Black guy, but as the American, it took some adjusting. It took some getting used to. And then, yeah, seeing that for the first time, experiencing that in my emotional and my mental life. That's an interesting part of this journey. Speaking of Sweden, the country that I came to initially to see if I could find full-time work in, I've been fortunate to interview 3 people in Sweden, 2 of them who have direct links to Sweden, with one of their parents being Swedish. One is Christopher Waldekrantz. Sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly, Christopher, who I was connected to through a mutual friend. He has an agency that he co-founded with his partner. I think they were fiancés at the time. I'm not sure if they're married, called the Odd Society. And I'll also put that link in the description. Another person that I interviewed who I knew before I started our Black Gay Diaspora podcast is Anna Adeniji. I had an opportunity to understand Swedish society a little bit more through her experiences as a Black woman living in Sweden, growing up in Sweden, which is something that I really connected to during my first visit to Stockholm in 2015. It was the first time that I felt most myself in a space, in a city, even though I'm not Swedish and, don't have that lineage through my family. I just really connected to the energy there. And then the third person that I interviewed is Afro-Swedish Samuel Girma. His family is originally from Ethiopia, and I think he came to Sweden, I think around 12, 13 years old. And he was one of those people I was a little nervous to interview because I actually knew about him, before the podcast, because I was in Stockholm when the thing exploded with the public murder of George Floyd in the United States, in Minnesota, I think it was. I was in Stockholm when that happened and was really surprised that there were marches. There was one march in particular I was able to witness literally right when it happened. I didn't know it was going to happen. Witnessing that and really finding out the history of ethnic minorities in Sweden and Stockholm. Samuel Girma was somebody that I knew or I found out about around that time because there was an online protest because of course that was at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Samuel Girma was one of the people that spoke. And I just really liked his passion. I really liked his authenticity that I saw on camera and his honesty. Yeah, once I got going with our Black Gay Diaspora podcast, I was like, oh, okay, I'll reach out to him. And he agreed. He and Bandy Kiki, who is from Cameroon, these are two guests for me as far as my own education around life outside of the US, especially with countries in Africa. I appreciate what they both had shared. Samuel has shared and does still share about life in Ethiopia, in particular the war that has been going on there for several years. Because me as a Black person in the US, it really opened my eyes to the power of media, how still selectively they are depending on who they want to showcase or represent. So I thank you, Samuel, for alerting me to being as diligent as I can be to find out as much as I can currently and in the past about the countries in Africa. And Bandy Kiki, who's, she's UK based, but she was another person from Cameroon. They've been having a war going on there for several years. It's so amazing the history, the experiences that I'm learning about different Black people in different parts of the world, in Europe, in different countries in Africa. Victor Chikalogwe, another one who educated me on life as a guy from Malawi and how he uses his platforms to inspire and celebrate and to promote our diversities, but also what makes us special and unique individually and culturally. Almost 2 years in. 2 years definitely the idea of this forming, but it'll be 2 years in April that I uploaded the first episode. Yeah, where I would like it to transition to is whenever a guest agrees to it to come onto camera, because I know that's a way to grow the platform, to make it more personal in some ways or more intimate is for you to see us on camera, to see me on camera, see the person behind the voice. I think that's helpful. I can say honestly, as a consumer of media, it does help me to kind of feel the person, what they're sharing on camera, who they are, their message, their platform. With interviewing 50 guests and the comments and the feedback that I get, I'll say this, that thing of like, comment, or subscribe, it does help with numbers. It does help with funding, but also helps with us as people, as interviewers, to get to know who you are and also to get to know how we can progress and to grow and to find out what you like, because that is important as you, the consumer, you as the listener, as you as the person watching this, is to find out what works for you and what you resonate with. So I definitely say, please like, comment, and subscribe constructively. I think that's always important. As a friend of mine used to say, as long as I'm coming from a place of love, even if it's constructive criticism, that is okay. Myself, me traveling, I did go back to the US last year for 7 months. That was good because I got to see myself differently as an American, as a Black American. One of the things, if you have had the opportunity to travel and to even live outside of the US, that you learn, this is not unique to me, is that you get to know yourself a bit more as yourself, as a citizen of that country. When I returned to the US last year for 6-7 months, it was an opportunity for me to stand in myself as an American. This has given me opportunities to say, this is who I am, and I need to be okay with that, and not focus on so much on what may or may not be said about me around my way that I present authentically, when I present authentically as a Black gay man. I wanted to continue to grow, to transition. I still love and am amazed by the people that I reach out to, the people that I discover, and still myself being wild about how many people that I find in different industries, different professions. And for me to stand within my own purpose as an interviewer, as a podcaster, as the creator of this platform, and to say, respect them. That's what this is about. But don't use it as an opportunity to negate um, who I am. So yeah, that's the journey, and that's where it's at so far. And I just look forward to it continuing to expand and to grow, and for me to expand and to grow and to see and to give myself opportunities to be vulnerable, not just in front of you, but also in my everyday interactions in my personal life, giving myself permission to say, yes, I can, and I believe in it. I thank you all for being here and for listening. And as you know, I always end this. It's become my catchphrase and I really like it. So I'm just going to say thank you for joining me. And as always, take care. And until next time, ciao.